Uh, Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and the key respondents and medical respondents and doctors for joining this wonderful session. The session is on 3D printing in medical devices. Yesterday, we had a very good session with doctors and clinicians who had actually shared their use cases starting from the morning. Dr. Mahesh, being one of them, would share some great insights in terms of the good work that they've been doing in pediatric cardiology. And I'm sure the session today, he will also be able to touch upon those aspects so that, a bit of that is also covered for people who have probably missed that presentation. It's a fantastic presentation. And today we will be touching upon devices, medical devices, very specifically. So Dr. Mahesh is actually a pediatric cardiologist from Amrita Institute of Medical Research from Kerala, and he's an active respondent of 3D printing technology, and he's been also a user, also an innovator, and he's also coming up with various different solutions for medical devices. So he also acts as an end user. He also acts as a clinician looking at solutions, that is the end user, and also offering solutions. So they've set up a fantastic lab in Amrita Institute of Research Institute, and they've been one of the finest setup that we find in hospitals. And that's the way forward. Going forward in terms of seeing an opportunity for setting up a lab in a hospital is a great idea, and commendable, doctor, for your good work that you've done, Dr. Mahesh. And let me introduce you to Dr. Pramod Jacob, who is actually the CEO of Digital Health India Association, an association which represents experts, doctors, surgeons, and also medical device companies and innovators coming up with new innovation and products and solutions. And he will also represent that particular community because they are the ones who are looking at solutions going forward. And our events are all end users responsive events, so it is more tilted towards end users' expectations and to see how we can actually bridge the gap and give the right solution going forward. Now, so Doctor, thank you for your presence and participation. Dr. Pramod Jacob is also the host of this event, so he has all the authority to churn the event the way he would want to. And I'm sure, Doctor, you'll do a good job in terms of what your expectations are. And we had a very good chat in the morning, and also even otherwise to know what is your expectation for this technology. Further, let me introduce Abhishek Kalra, who is actually an application engineer with Altem Technologies. Altem Technologies being one of the leading companies offering solutions as a one-stop solution in software, in 3D printers, in 3D printing services, across different applications from aerospace, defense, technology in terms of automobile. So we've been doing a lot of work in this space and being there for some good time, almost 12 to 13 years in the space. Abhishek, if I'm not wrong, yeah, almost a year. And also in medical, and now they've been also venturing very well in terms of their presence in medical, in dental, and also medical devices. They've been offering some fantastic solutions. So I'm sure it's a good panel to share their insights. So one being the end user who is expecting the technology to benefit, to see what are the various solutions that can be offered by the service providers. And one, obviously, somebody who has really achieved big, Dr. Mahesh, who's been acting as both end user and also someone who is also offering solutions and been working and expecting things to shape up as we progress for 3D printing. And Abhishek also is the application engineer with the company, and I'm sure it will be a very detailed session. So let me now ask Dr. Pramod Jacob to start his presentation and then lead the session.
Okay, thank you for the introduction, Shibu, and thanks to my co-presenters for taking the time and the effort to give their presentations. So how we're going to do this is I will be presenting a use case. I like Shibu had mentioned, I kind of represent an association of healthcare information technologists and also, we are into all the parts which fall within within that ecosystem, right? When you have a healthcare ecosystem, healthcare information technology ecosystem, you have devices that connect to it. You have got all the other parts which connect to it to make a whole. And you have the recording system, the record keeping system, so on and so forth. So one of the challenges we faced, and I want to present that challenge to you all and ask my co-panelists to see how we could have answered that or can answer it in the situation that we are in India today. It is related to COVID, and I've taken that as an example because I think it was something that we will probably face yet again. And what should we do the next time? So give me a moment here while I start my presentation. I am hoping, give me okay, application window. Now we need to get this going. And just a moment here. Let me just toggle up between the systems. Yeah, here you go. And am I right, Shibu?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to start from the first slide. Give me a moment here so that we can go into presentation mode. There we go. So you're seeing my first slide. Is that okay? Or are you seeing the window which shows two slides?
No. Right now we can't see anything, doctor. You just need to click on that screen so that it comes live.
All right. Give me a moment. Now?
Yes.
All
now
right.
we can see the slide.
You can see it. Okay. So, like Chibu mentioned, my name is Dr. Pramod Jacob, and I am going to be talking about the 3D printing as an end user and as part of the medical ecosystem of how we can what do we do? How can we get utilization of it in India? Okay.
Doctor, sorry to now you need to choose your slide. You need to click that so that the entire screen is actually.
So are you seeing my screen which has two slides, or do you have one which has a single slide? Because then I have to exchange. Please tell me that.
We are seeing the one with two slides.
Okay. Give me a moment here. Slideshow. And now?
Yeah, now I can see one slide. Yes, perfect, doctor.
All right. Okay. So I'm going to give this scenario that I had asked my co-panelists to answer. One of the things that we have done as an association is we have worked very closely with rural and remote hospitals. Okay, what happened was when COVID got into India and the issue of the lockdown came about, right? When the issue of the lockdown came about, the point is you still had to carry on with telehealthcare or with healthcare, right? And what was found as a solution was something called telehealth or telemedicine. I'm sure you all have all heard of it. That doctors started using starting with WhatsApp, Zoom, and started talking to their patients so that their patients didn't have to come to the hospitals. And that's how that awareness about digital health came about and has really grown in the last 3 months or 4 months or maybe 5 months. There has been more growth in that than it has been the last 20 years, okay, in India and even the world over. Part of that was that we were now able to utilize that sort of a connection that happened by helping hospitals who are in Bihar, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, the rural areas, by providing them, with firstly with Zoom and then later even with more sort of specialized telemedicine platforms so that they could get to talk to their patients and get to resolve issues they were facing. Initially, in these hospitals in Bihar, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, they did not have much COVID because if you remember, COVID started in the big towns or in the big cities like Bombay, Madras, right? That's where they started, and they had not yet come into Bihar, Jharkhand for a while until we all remember what happened, that unfortunate incident of the migrants returning home. That is when it started hitting those areas. And if the infrastructure in those areas, it is really, really poor. Okay. When I say really poor, I mean to get to a hospital or maybe even to get to a doctor, a medical doctor. It could take you very well up to 3 to 4 hours just to get to that, doctor if he's available, right? It's that sort of situation. So you can imagine the situation if you really got sick and you needed oxygen and you needed ICU sort of situation. It was very, very difficult. Fortunately for us, when the migrants did return, by then we had got certain things in place. One of the hospitals we were working, a group of hospitals, something called the mission hospitals, who have a presence there. And what happens is these are hospitals who have been there for many, many years. And they started ramping up to be able to handle the load that came in. And what happened was that if a patient gets severe, right, Initially, many of them are asymptomatic, but if they do start getting respiratory problem, initially you try low flow oxygen, what is known as low flow oxygen. But at some point of time, when they get a little more severe, you have to start what is known as high flow oxygen. And that is from 5 to 10 liters per minute. You will ramp it up to anything up to 60 liters per minute. What is also advisable is that you do not intubate them and ventilate them, because it is found that those who get intubated and go into ventilation, they have a very bad chance of the survival. Basically, mortality is very high. But if you keep it without intubating them, but give them high flow somehow, then the chances of coming out of it are quite good. However, that requires a devices or set number of devices. And as usual, supply is always an issue. We had a shortage, not just only in ventilators, which is an invasive manner, but also in the non-invasive sort of way of delivering this oxygen. So what happened was I'm going the wrong way. What happened therefore was this shortage of these devices came about, and we had to find a way of providing a device which was affordable and also pretty tough, because if it could last without any power, because in these rural areas you're never sure about having power and so on. But as far as you had some oxygen tanks and all to give the oxygen, can we send that flow and high flow? Now, fortunately for us, out of the blue, there was a company called Inspira who approached us and said that, listen, we have this device. And in fact, this company Inspira is based in India, but they had very deep connections in the UK. And there was this device that was actually designed by the University of City of London and Mercedes-Benz. And they came up with a device which was very well used in the UK for giving this, delivering this high flow oxygen. And they were willing to offer it to our deserving hospitals in these rural areas, right, for cost price, because it was a group of people who felt they wanted to do something. Many of them are non-resident Indians or Indians of UK of Indian origin who wanted to give back something to the country, and therefore they came up with this offer of Inspira manufacturing the devices and offering it at almost cost price to these deserving hospitals. Now, the problem that came about was these devices needed one accessory called a Peep Valve, which is a valve that controls the flow of oxygen being, sent over to the patient, or, basically the flow of oxygen. You could control, if you have the Peep Valve, you can control it from 5 liters per minute going all the way to 60 liters per minute. As you know, when you're starting somebody, you start him off on 5 to 10 liters, and only if he needs, you start increasing that, to 20, 15, 20, like that. But the problem was that valve, firstly, was in shortage. And secondly, the manufacturing world had come to a standstill because of the lockdown across the world, not just in India alone. And therefore, we had this problem. Okay. That is when I got in touch with Shibu, who I had met in a conference before. And fortunately, had given me his card, talked about the 3D Association of 3D Printing Association. And I said, Shibu, can we do something about this? So let me come to and show you the device. Actually, this is the device you see here. This is the sort of device that gives that flow. And it's a very neat, small, no need for power. It is a tough device, very, very suitable for our rural setting. But the issue came in this particular valve that we needed for being able to deliver it, to the patient. So now my questions were, and my questions are to my eminent panelists, that does India have the facility and capacity to produce such auxiliaries and in volume with 3D printing? If not in volume, at least something so that we can get it going while manufacturing kicks in somewhere. Then are these facilities available only in major metros, or will they also be available in tier 2 or 3 cities like Raipur, Jhansi, Surat, some examples like that? What would be the time required for making one such piece once full production is ramped up? I'm not talking of the prototypes time and all. So once you finish the prototype and all, once you actually get into some serious production time, how much time would it take to make one such piece? I'm guessing the material would be plastic, right? That would be probably the most, or whatever most convenient. Somehow we have to deliver that oxygen to that person and have a valve there. That is what is required, whichever material you want to use. And what would be the cost per piece? Such an order for 100 such pieces were given to a facility or service provider. This is an important question. Please let's address it so that we have a baseline. We will look at how we can bring costs down later, but we need to know this right now, because the first thing that hospitals ask for. Okay, in India, kitna ke deta hai or whatever, that is the first thing they will ask, right? So we have to have a rough idea at least. And how would one go about tracking such or getting in touch with such a service provider in your neighborhood and starting discussions with them? So my question is there a directory or an association, which I'm guessing Shibu is probably facilitating? And how do we facilitate such discussions and such tracking? So those are my questions, and I would love my panelists. Be great if my panelists can answer these questions. And just want to say that if in case we have some time in the end, I would like to talk about another movement that is happening nationwide. There's a nationwide network coming up, which I want to just take about 10 minutes to explain to you all. With that, I am done, Shibu, and maybe whoever would like to take it over from here and answer these questions would be great. Thank you. So I will stop presenting. Am I still in the meeting or am I out of it? Because there's a real sound of silence coming through.
No, you're still in the meeting, sir.
I'll stop presenting.
Yeah, now it's gone out of the presentation mode. So I can answer part of that question, part of your question, that probably Dr. Mahesh can also add up to things. So the question is, can we do significant volumes of smaller parts? The answer is definitely yes. In fact, during the early days of the lockdown, when it was expected that there'll be a big demand of components like ventilators, there are 3D printing companies, of course, service providers who have manufactured up to components of say 100 or 200 ventilators per day. So that is close to 5,000 or 6,000 parts per day, assuming that one ventilator would require at least 20 to 25 3D printed parts beyond the electronics and other parts of things. The part that you are talking about specifically, I'm assuming it's going to be a very small part, maybe not more than an inch in diameter and about an inch in height, maybe even smaller. So with today's available technology, from predominantly the technology of technologies such as powder bed fusion technologies, which are a little more industrial in scale, you could probably end up with one machine, say, manufacture about 1,000 to 2,000 parts a day at a cost of not more than 200 or 300 rupees per part. That is my very, very crude assumption. So now the question whether it's too cheap or too expensive is that it's something.
No. I'm in fact surprised that you're telling me it's 200 rupees per day, because I really expect it to be much more. And I'm also very surprised that you're telling me that 1,000 to 2,000 is possible per day.
Yes, it is very much possible with a specific type of technology. So there are multiple 3D printing technologies in the world: fused deposition modeling, polyjet, stereolithography, selective laser sintering, DMLS, which is metal based. This particular application of very quick customized low volume production is executed through powder bed fusion technologies, which is basically that you have a chamber of say 300 by 300 by 300 in size, roughly, and you can stack the complete volume. So you could nest parts on top of each other, inside each other, and typically a whole bed and as many parts as you could fit into it would take between 24 to 48 hours in strong functional materials that can sustain some sort of pushing pressures, even some higher temperatures of up to 100 degree, which I'm pretty sure will not be required. In fact, this is a very simple example, but using technologies like polymer powder bed fusion, as well as some of the fused deposition modeling technologies, we have executed projects which require which are even parts which are going inside the ventilator, so parts which are subjected to high pressures. And with such a small part, I'm pretty sure we can deliver 1,000 parts a day. Now, answering your question, is this facility available in tier 2 cities? Not much. Currently, the only tier 2 city that I can probably think of which has facilities available is a place like Chandigarh or Ludhiana. But if you talk about Jhansi or Raipur or Patna, probably not. So it has to come out of the metros, Delhi, Bombay, Pune, Bangalore, specifically these four. But then what we also figured out is that because we do a lot of projects where we do patient-specific models which are used for surgical planning, I'm sure Dr. Mahesh will cover a lot of that in his presentation. We have logistics set up where we can have them delivered to any part of India in a maximum period of 24 hours. So if a customer is ready to give an order today, in 48 to 72 hours, he will have the parts in his hand. And this is what we essentially call as bridge to production, that you keep supplying the quantities of the parts to whoever is necessary till we can get production prepared, which would at least take 2 to 3 weeks for tooling preparation and supply chain preparation around it. Now, the problem becomes a little more difficult if the part size increases to say 10 centimeter or 15 centimeter, then the volumes that we can deliver will become less because we still have that same amount of space and as many parts as we can fit inside that space will be printed in a fixed amount of time. So small to medium parts, when I say small to medium parts, anything between 1 centimeter and say 5 centimeter, we can do 100 to low 1,000 or high hundreds in a day or 2 days. But if you talk about larger parts, we are looking at a few tens per day.
Interesting. I mean, this is much better situation than I thought, and in fact, the pricing also is really something more affordable than I had thought, because I thought otherwise. See, what happens is, I'll tell you. I mean, I'm just telling you guys because this is what is I think the opinion in the medical fraternity, that that 3D printing and anything in 3D printing is very expensive, okay, and time consuming. And when you gave me these figures of saying that you can go up to 1,000 per day and 200 per piece is very reasonable. Frankly, it is very reasonable. I'm quite surprised. I thought it was more like going to be 10 times that amount really. And the fact that if metros is fine, 72-hour supply is great. I really am pretty impressed by all that, and I think then the situation is much better than what I had expected or what people think about the supply app pricing and the production capability. So these are all things we'll have to probably work on letting people get informed. Dr. Mahesh, your comments, please. Whatever you would like to add.
Yeah. Firstly, I would say that yes, this particular device, for example, what you're talking about, the Peep Valve, is something that delivers high flow oxygen. These are devices which are very much in need. Definitely during the COVID times, and perhaps even beyond that, extending beyond that, high flow oxygen delivery systems are something which are really needed. And most of the systems that we have are imported ones, and we struggle with the costs and reuse issues, etc. So having a robust mechanism of having high flow devices made here and serviced here is a very useful idea. So definitely I support that objective of making these devices. Second, I am in complete agreement with whatever Abhishek has said with regard to producing these devices as a bridge to production using 3D printing technologies. Like he said, with powder bed technologies, it's definitely possible to make in large numbers, even using the other technologies like FDM, etc. It won't be as scalable to as higher numbers. But of course, if you can recruit multiple 3D printing farms or 3D printers across the country, yes, significant numbers can be generated. And the cost also, I completely agree that it can be done at very low cost, like 200 rupees was exactly the number that I had in my own mind. So very much doable as a bridge to production, yes.
So let me ask my next question then. Now that we know it's possible, what would be the steps or how would we go? I don't know anybody who's in 3D printing. Luckily, I know Shibu, right? But many people don't know this. How would we find somebody, even in the metro, or a person who could basically tell us and take this forward? How can we start the discussions, the negotiations with such a provider? Or okay, firstly, I also want to know. You mentioned the word farm, so I'm expecting. I think what you mean is that you can either have a single machine sort of a setup, or you can have multiple machines in a sort of farm, or you could probably have multiple single machines basically producing the numbers, cooperating with each other, collaborating with each other, whatever way. So can you give me an idea about how, as an end user or as a client, I would actually go about trying to get this going or get this done? Who would I approach? How will I find out information? How can I start discussions with them? So please tell me that.
Okay, I'll answer first. So the one of the challenges is that, of course, larger companies like ourselves and some of our competitors who have larger machines obviously have a very large presence across the internet. So if you Google high volume 3D printing services. Anybody can Google. We are the kind of people who would probably pop up, and then you'll start calling us, and then because we have different technologies and different technologies experience personnel on board, we can sort of guide you so as to which process is suitable. But the print farm subject that Dr. Mahesh raised on was principally, see, this is the industrial 3D printing community, but there is a lot of people who have smaller printers, printers which cost even say 1 or 2 lakh rupees, which can do the jobs but are not scalable. So somebody with a 2 lakh or a 3 lakh or even a 5 lakh rupees small FDM printer could probably only print 10 to 20 a day. And that's what happened during the early days of the COVID, when a lot of face shields and masks and other sort of PPE equipment was in demand. That communities like 3D hubs is one, where you can list your printer, whether it be a small one or a large one. Similarly, there's a software company called Dassault Systems, which has a platform which is called 3D Experience Marketplace, where you could list your printer, and then anybody who requires 3D printing would go there. Now, you probably have, let's say, a job requirement of 500 parts, and you need them by end of next week. So you could, instead of contacting one supplier, contact 20 different suppliers who do whatever is in their capacity and ship it to you. Now, yes, definitely there's going to be a difference of quality. Maybe some will be very good, some will be not so good. So that's a challenge with the print farm approach, especially for more complex projects. Face shields and face masks were relatively simpler jobs, if somebody wants a good industrial 3D printing, all they need to go is Google their requirements, start speaking to a couple of people, evaluate their sense of understanding from a perspective of looking at their previous projects, or seeing how the consultant, whoever is speaking to you, is responding to your application. In terms of, you have to have a sense of judgment, and more importantly, look at what sort of infrastructure they have on site or available. For example, we have multiple machines that can cater to multiple technologies. Some people have only one, some people have something else. There are some people who only have metal, some people only have plastic. So it's a little bit of a hidden trial there, but it's only required once. Once you're done with it, hopefully successfully, then you can have a supplier for life. And that's what happens with people like us, that companies get in touch once, and then they become our clients for many, many years to come. And we do repetitive contract manufacturing jobs for them.
And what is it that you would require out of your client to show you?
What sort of images? Yeah. Ideally, we require a 3D design file, which comes as CAD. So if you have a 3D design file, that's the only thing that you need to 3D print, irrespective of what technology it is, whether it be a low-cost technology or a high-cost technology. But often we have scenarios where people do not have 3D design files available, especially a hospital looking to replace the parts. Then 3D scanning comes into picture. That becomes a little more complex, because then somebody has to go on site, or the part has to be shipped to us. We can 3D scan it, get the digital data from a physical part, and reverse engineer and design the component around it. So that becomes a little longer process. So it's not that then I cannot have parts to you by tomorrow. It will probably take a week, 7 to 8 days, depending upon the logistics of getting the part to the scanner or getting the scanner to the part. But then once we have the CAD file, we are good to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dr. Mahesh, anything you would like to?
I think Abhishek has covered everything that needs to be said on this issue. Yes, it is the 3D virtual design file which is needed for any 3D printing process, right? So if you at your end are able to perfect the design and you have the 3D design file, then going on to 3D printing is a simple process. You just transition into the production. If you don't have the file, then either it has to be designed from scratch, that somebody with expertise in CAD is designing the structure as per the need, or like Abhishek said, if there is a part already which can be scanned and then converted into a digital 3D design file for the printing. So that is the essential requirement.
Okay. Now, I'm sorry, I did not ask. Do you all have a presentation to give, or would you all like to present something, or can I carry on with the question answer session? How would you like to do that? Move forward.
I do not have a presentation to make. Abhishek, do you?
I do have a presentation to make.
So we'll carry on with Abhishek's presentation now, and then probably come back to question answers if we have time.
Yes.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Now?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And we are in the full screen mode, right?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
So, as Shibu has already introduced, I'm not going to take a lot of time. I run application engineering from a company called Altum Technologies. We've been around for about 10 years now, and we like to call ourselves as a 3D innovation platform company because we have the capability to solve anybody's product design, product development, and product manufacturing problems end to end, from design to production and between optimization and simulation. At the heart of our solution is 3D printing and 3D scanning, which contributes to about 60% of our revenue and about 60% of our install base also. Over the years, we have about 400 plus customers. Amrita Institute is a customer of ours, not Dr. Mahesh's lab, but another lab within Amrita from the incubator side. And we have customers in automotive and aerospace. And over the past 3 years, a lot of healthcare establishments, right from hospitals like the various All India institutes across the country, Delhi, Rishikesh, to large MNC medical device companies like Medtronic and GE, to smaller homegrown medical device companies like Oxygen Medical and Prantai Solutions, and dental companies have got associated with us, where we're doing different kinds of things with us, or they have bought machines from us. So we are both a service provider as well as we supply machines from a company called Stratasys. Now today I'm going to be principally talking about how we can create anatomical models, lifelike anatomical models, which look, feel, and behave in the same way as an actual patient anatomical model or organ would, and how that will aid in medical device testing. Now, as we all know, and medical devices has become a very, very commonly spoken about subject, especially and even with the masses today because of COVID, things like pulse oximeter, thermometers, ventilators, every person on the street is talking about them. But typically, medical devices are classified into 3 categories: low risk, medium to high risk, and very high risk. The low risk ones typically being non-invasive ones, and the medium to high risk one typically being invasive one. For those of you who do not know what invasive is somebody that a device that directly interacts with the interior of the body. So things like surgical equipment or ventilators that go inside and interact with the functioning of the organ, or implants, or stents or pacemakers, something which interacts very closely with the organ or set of organs and stays inside and interact for a period of life. Now, globally, medical devices is a very big, close to $400 billion market. India is about 7 to 8 or 6 to 8 billion dollar market. Unfortunately, 80 to 70% of the medical devices that are made in India, that are supplied in India, are imported, which is a problem, but it's also an opportunity, especially that the country now is looking at a self-reliance and an Atmanirbhar model. This brings an opportunity for made in India, for India, from India. We have a very good set of expertise, both in healthcare, from a medicine point of view, as well as engineering. Some of the top engineering minds come from India, as well as we can look at reducing costs and imports. The biggest challenge today is that some of these devices can get very, very, very expensive. And the reason is because there are duties, and somebody who's manufacturing in UK is obviously going to price it as per UK. Whereas if you make it in India, we can develop very, 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 very cheaply, and hence have a very, very reduced cost impact on the masses, which unfortunately cannot afford expensive healthcare. Now, just to give you a background, these can be generic devices like oximeters or thermometers, or they can be patient specific like implants or surgical guides which are used in surgeries. But the core concept is that they must be safe and efficient and affordable. Safety is a very, very important parameter, and that's why the testing of the medical devices or the approvals of the medical devices are very, very stringent. But the general process would be to start from idea and to get into approval and then finally get into market. Now, designing a medical device can be simple. I say this because during the early days of the COVID lockdown, even automotive companies like Ashok Leyland, Ford, Volkswagen, which are some of our customers, were successfully able to design things like ventilators. So it's designing somebody who's good with engineering and design in general, which we have a lot of expertise in India. It can be done pretty easily. Testing and validation becomes extremely challenging because the conditions and the standards are very, very stringent. Hence, prototyping becomes a very, very crucial step. This is the part that's going to prove to the testing authorities and to yourself that the device works efficiently and most importantly safely. And prototype is of course the device itself, but it also needs to depend upon how the device is going to react to the anatomy. For example, if we take an example of a ventilator, if we ramp up the pressure too high, it might actually lead to more problems than the solution. If the pressure is higher than what the organs or the lung can handle, then it could be probably lead to more catastrophe than rather than solving the problem. Now, if we talk about 3D printing, we typically imagine or envision products like this, products which look strong and functional, which represent the rough and tough or the design mechanism of the part. But of lately, 3D printing technologies have been developed which can create multicolor, multi-material parts that can have rigid and soft material integrated amongst each other. And that this part of the thing gave a very good solution to the medical industry, that if we can create a multicolor, multi-material shoe, we might as well create a multicolor, multi-material organ which represents the pathology and of the anatomy in a safe environment without having to look at alternatives such as animal organs or cadaver models. And the journey of a prototype is basically divided into form, fit, and function. So whenever you're prototyping anything, whether it be a component of a car or a component of a medical device, you need to evaluate it for its form, how it fits amongst each other, and to the subsystem that it's gonna act on. So for example, if it's a pacemaker, how it's gonna install or cohesively fit together with respect to the anatomy, and how the function is going to perform. And the fitment and the function can be very, very critically dependent upon the actual anatomy. So what we can do is that instead of testing these devices, especially the invasive ones, on human cadavers, which can be difficult to access, they are government protocols. Now the larger companies like the GE, the Stryker, the Medtronic obviously have a lot of access within their labs and through their overseas facilities. But if we talk about smaller startups, companies with very, very limited access, it becomes really difficult to get these kind. I was talking to one professor from VNIT Nagpur, and what she told me was that she had to wait about 8 months for the government hospital to give her the approval to get a cadaver available for the device testing. And if it doesn't work, which it's likely not going to work in the stage 1 trial, you have to wait another year or 6 months or 4 months, whatever be the time limit, to get the access to the specific anatomies or cadavers again, which becomes a very, very big challenge. So then comes the concept: can we fabricate it on demand? Can we have do we have technologies available which can take any and every organ of the body or a combination of organs and create models which not only look like the model but also feel and behave like the model? And that's where we come with a technology called PolyJet, which essentially works similar to a 2D inkjet printer. You can mix multiple materials together: soft materials, rigid materials, transparent materials, biomimicking materials which can mimic things like tissues and bones, and create a multi-material model which can represent the pathology very, very accurately, like you see on the screen on the left hand side. This can be used both for device testing, of course, but also for actual patient work, where I believe Dr. Mahesh has done quite a lot of work, where the different region of interests can be represented in different colors and mimicking the material of the actual anatomy, so that surgeons can perform the surgery on this, or trainee surgeons can practice on this and get access to it. Now, you might ask what would be the cost of it. So my general understanding is that the cost of these models can range between 5,000 and 35 to 40,000, depending upon which organ it is, how big it is, or how small it is. So it's not dirt cheap like commodity, but it's not very, very expensive also if you look at the overall both clinical as well as cost outcomes. And just to give you some perspective, there is not a single organ or type of organ that cannot be recreated realistically. Not only can we create the exterior of the organ, but we can also create internal features like bone density and bone matrix directly with 3D printing. And not only can we create a model that looks kind of like and feels kind of like the organ, but something that can behave like the organ. So for this, we developed a special 3D printing technology called digital anatomy printing, where we created specific materials called tissue matrix and bone matrix. Tissue matrix gives you the behavior characteristics. When I say behavior characteristics, it can replicate dissecting, feeling, tensile strength, biomechanical properties like burst pressure or tear resistance of the tissues, as well as bone matrix, which will represent recreate the same thing for the hard tissues or the bones. We have a unique voxel-based engine, where all you need to do is that you need to import your anatomy and you need to tell the printer software that what anatomy it is. So we have blood vessels, general anatomy, heart, skeletal-muscular. We're bringing in neuro and urology in the next updates, and a set of sub-anatomies. So you select or tell the printer which anatomy, what is imported and it is what anatomy, and it automatically mixes the 7 materials to create a structure which looks like the organ, feels like the organ, and behaves like the organ. We created these materials and this technology in conjunction with Medtronic, which is one of the largest medical device companies in the world, and Jacobs Institute, which is a hospital cum research center, who took these materials, took real human tissues, both hard and soft, and ran mechanical physical tests on them, and proved that these materials, and hence the components that are printed out of these materials, behave almost 90 to 85% in the same way as a real organ would, giving the market a very easy solution to do as many number of tests, and the surgeons and clinicians a very easy solution to practice, simulate, or teach surgery in a lab away from human cadavers, and as many iterations and as many versions of it. Now I'll just come back to the slide and end it to it. There's a huge opportunity lack in India, and I cannot insist it enough, while the larger companies have all the resources at their disposal to do this testing overseas, or to invest in expensive technologies, the Indian companies really need technologies of 3D printing, this and other 3D printing technologies, which can enable them to create, test, implement, and perfect medical devices faster and better. And I think that's a very medical device indigenization is a very important step if we need to make our country self-reliant and Atmanirbhar. And with that, I end my presentation. Thank you so much for all of you for listening.
Thank you, Abhishek. That was an excellent presentation, and it's always so exciting to learn about the newer technologies in 3D printing, and these polyjet printers from Stratasys, which give anatomically identical kind of models. They are going to be a big sort of game changer in terms of the physician and user experience with the models, especially in simulation settings.
Yes.
So I particularly, as a physician who's deeply involved with 3D printing, I'm really excited by how this technology is evolving, because we are constantly trying to play with anatomical models which are as anatomically realistic as possible, other than just giving the visual perspective, especially for creating simulation environments and for device testing. Very importantly, for device testing. So if we are able to replicate the physical mechanical properties of real tissues through 3D models, it's a huge leap forward in terms of what we can do with it, and so many applications for that. What I do want to ask is, how do you think it's going to work with, this technology also penetrating into the sector of point of care labs? Do you think these are technologies that can be adopted by medical institutions as they go on deeper into setting up POC labs like our own setup? So expense is a issue, one, for the machines themselves, and secondly, the materials are also expensive, and many of these materials are patented by the makers. And so do you think that we will be able to create materials like this on our own over here, or will we have to wait for that for a long time to come? Because that will really determine the costs that will come with it, right?
Yes. So that's an excellent question. As I'll answer the materials part first. So of course, these materials are still patented by Stratasys, and rightly so, because there's a lot of R&D that has gone behind making it.
Sure.
At the end of the day, the objective is that the clinicians or the surgeons or the device people need to focus on getting the right print or the right output, rather than figuring out how the printer works, especially with this kind of technology. Today, this technology is not very cheap. If you look at a starting version of a PolyJet platform, you're looking at an investment of about 50 to 60 lakh, which does a multi-material prototype, something which is as big as the DAP, FDA approved with biomechanical mimicking. You're looking at an investment of a few crores. There have been hospitals who have adopted this technology in India, mostly with the government, because there obviously they don't pay for the machine. They are mostly that comes from grant money. Private hospitals not so much, but then there are a lot of services companies that have popped up. We are one of them, of course, since we are one of the promoters and the owners of the technology, where we are able to give these models to surgeons at a very good cost, not commodity cheap costs, but not bad costs. So the typical cost could range between 10,000 and 30,000, which is not cheap, but not too expensive also. I mean, if you're looking at a very complex surgery, or if you're looking at a 6-month wait for a device testing for a medical device, as compared to you could do it tomorrow, at least early stages. So we are, as Stratasys, as an OEM also, we are trying to bring the cost down as much as possible. Patient point of care labs, I definitely see happening as the machines become a little more cheaper. But till then, it will be intelligent to tie up with some services company who has the expertise and of course the infrastructure to do this job and get it done on a job basis. Incidentally, the government of West Bengal has set up such a center under West Bengal Electronics Limited, which is called Webel COE, where it's not only limited to medical, but they have bought a machine like this, which has already started to cater to some of the hospitals like Tata Medical Center and Fortis on almost 3 to 4 models on a weekly basis. So that kind of arrangement is a very good setup for a hospital to start doing patient point of care until the investment is justified that they can bring their own machine in.
Sorry, I just need to interject here. When you said that 10,000 to 30,000 per something you mentioned, can be, it's a hiring sort of charge, or what is it?
No,
How does that
so
work? Can you
it's
explain
basically a rough estimate I'm giving on how much would it cost to produce a digital anatomy print.
Oh, okay.
So kidney or heart.
For having So they provide you the images and you would produce that, and that will be how much it roughly
Yes, so
cost,
they will
right?
give us the CT or the MRI data, and then we'll use software tools to regenerate the organ of interest from that data and then print it.
So Dr. Mahesh, what I therefore understand is if you have some CT scan, say, of a heart lesion or some lesion like that of a patient, then that can be handed over to someone like Abhishek, who would then reproduce that in a sort of 3D model and hand it over in whatever material you want between that price range you mentioned. Am I understanding
Yes.
that correctly?
Yes, that's right.
And is this generally then cost passed on to the patient, if I may ask? It is natural. It would only be fair to. So I'm just confirming that cost will probably be passed on to the patient, because his savings comes in the fact that you will have probably a much more efficient surgery, much less time in the theater, right? All that will justify that cost.
That's
Yeah.
correct. That's
Okay.
correct.
Okay. All right. Now I'll let you all carry on your discussion.
Yeah. So Dr. Pramod brought in a very interesting perspective of cost. Um, this is a debatable topic, whether to pass on the cost to the patient or not, or how to justify that cost. Some doctors have told us that we were able to save 3 hours of surgery time over a 10-hour surgery, so that cost itself got nullified. Some doctors say that, especially in the masses of the population, which that the cost seems to be too high, spending an additional 30,000 on a surgery that might already cost a lakh of rupees. So it really depends on perspective to perspective and what the business model of the hospital is, so to speak. So one of our customers is a hospital called Ludhiana Mediways Hospital in Punjab. So they are able to sort of offset the cost because they are able to reduce the surgery time, but it's rather more on the clinical outcomes. Can we reduce, say, blood loss, or can we reduce anesthesia because we can conclude the surgery faster? It's today the debate is more there rather than the cost directly. But yeah, in most cases, if there is a cost, it has to be passed down to the patient, unless it's a government hospital.
Yes. So, one of the advantages that I was able to eke out by setting up a POC lab within my hospital for 3D printing was that I could actually reduce the cost, because we were doing this in-house and we had support from the institution. So we were really able to subsidize the costs that. So prior to setting up a POC lab, we were using third-party service providers, and obviously the service providing business, it is a business model, so obviously they have to take care of their margins. So when we started doing the printing within the hospital using our own facilities, obviously we were able to cut down on the cost significantly, uh, drastically, and so even when the cost was being passed on to the patient, it was a much lower cost. Also, much of our work was also supported by grants, etc. Also, which also helped us subsidize the cost that it was coming to. We also did an audit of how it was having a clinical impact, and we could establish it very scientifically that we were actually cutting down on the number of days that a patient had to remain in an ICU, the amount of blood products a patient was receiving, the number of complications which we were avoiding. We were able to do a very careful audit over hundreds of 3D print assisted surgeries, and thereby establishing the fact that when we use such tools, we are actually able to reduce the patient treatment costs in general, both to the patient as well as to the institution. When a patient overstays in an institution, it's not cost effective for the institution as well, because the patient turnover of the institution comes down. So when we do surgery in a safer way, it definitely is a win-win situation both for the patient and for the institutions. And in India, since most patients, it's a self-paying kind of a healthcare system that we have in India. We are not supported by largely by large-scale insurances. So therefore the cost, whatever costs are there, goes to the patient. In the West, in the US, they are trying to get this the process of medical 3D printing incorporated into their insurance paradigms, and there've been recent developments which are paving the way towards medical 3D printing being completely, as they call it, reimbursable.
Yeah.
That is covered by their healthcare insurance schemes.
Yeah, I'd like to add one more point here. In China, actually, the patient point of care with 3D printing is covered under insurance. Stratasys was one of the major contributors and beneficiaries of that thing, because we are one of the technologies that got approved. And there are 20 centers across China which are certified, that can be used by, some of them are in hospitals, some of them are essentially service providers which have one or more of these machines, and hospitals can tie up with these 20 centers, and it gets reimbursed to the patient in the same way as a general hospital bill would get reimbursed. So Chinese government was able to do it about 4 years ago. As Dr. Mahesh said correctly, the Americas are trying to do it. If I'm not wrong, Germany has also managed to do it. So if there can be some way, if policymakers, if anybody is on the call, or if Shibu and amongst us, whatever connections we have, if we can advocate this to the policymakers, that will be an interesting point. That if we can bring this to the insurance, then it will be a very, very good thing for everybody, for service providers, for hospitals, and of course for patients.
So the only one request that I had to the industry was that, I've been fortunate to actually visit the headquarters in Minneapolis for Stratasys. A couple of years back, I was a guest there, and I had the opportunity to view the facilities, both for Medtronic as well as with Stratasys. So the one thing which I do say to industry, be it hardware manufacturers like Stratasys, medical device manufacturers like Medtronic, or software creators like Materialize, is that the costing should be a little more centric towards the regions where these are used, because when you extrapolate the same costs which are there for the Americas or the Europe, and when the products are extrapolated exactly the same cost in India or other lower resource environments, it kind of becomes a little more difficult. Because obviously the environment is difficult, the paying capacity of people is different, the whole funding systems are way lot different. But this has been one major issue which we have been appealing to much of this manufacturer. Though I do agree that it's very difficult for them to have different costing in different parts of the world, but at least in areas where, or regions where, these technologies have great potential. I mean, my worry is that they should not end up not being used because the cost is prohibitive.
Yes.
Because to encourage adoption, because these are technologies which need a huge deal of motivation to adopt, especially.
So if I may just comment here, Dr. Mahesh and Abhishek, actually, see, we talked of, I think Abhishek mentioned the sum of about 10 to 30,000 rupees, right? Okay. Well, frankly, 1.5, 2 lakh, what is 10 to 30,000 if it is saving you so much, even the patient time on the table, if it's being saved and blood loss is being saved. I don't think these are, frankly, the pricing has been a real surprise to me in our discussions. I thought everything would be 10 times as expensive. And the reason I say this is just yesterday, among my classmates, from Vellore, one of them is a neurosurgeon. And I was bringing up about, the conference. I'm trying to make it, people aware. There's something known as 3D conference. There's something known as 3D printing. Please have a look at it. It is the next big thing in medical medicine that is going to make a difference to us. So he gave me a comment back saying that, in Apollo, he's based in Apollo, and that they did this, they used the 3D printing. I believe they got a device, or they got this particular implant or whatever it is from Germany. And he said that the cost of that implant was more expensive than the stay of the patient in the hospital. So this, what happens is that when you say something like this in a group of doctors, right, in a medical college group of doctors, immediately that is what sits in your mind.
So, Dr. Pramod, the first time that I did a 3D print for a heart, 3D print of a heart for the first patient that I operated on. At that time, we didn't have the printers here, and I collaborated with the Belgian company to produce that. So at that time, the cost of that heart model was close to about 2,300 euros for one heart model. Though eventually we did get it subsidized, but it was about 2,300 euros. Today, I'm producing the same model for less than 2,000 rupees.
So that is the big thing I think that has to get across to the medical community. That the costing has now become so much more affordable, because when you said 200 per piece, I was almost, blinking my eyes. And when you're saying 20 to 30,000 for being able to produce something that will make the operation so much easier and so much of better, efficient, and reduction in time, I think that is something that is very affordable even today by our Indians. I'm not talking of, where the rural, this thing and all. That may be somewhere down the line, but definitely in our urban areas, what is 20 to 30,000 in a hospital bill today? Okay, let's face it. Average hospital stay without ICU per day is about 15,000 to 20,000. If you're, in a fairly, I'm not talking of the luxurious hospitals. So adding on 15 to 30,000 or 10 to 30,000 for a surgery, which might be so helpful for saving your life, saving your blood loss, and reducing that time is very affordable. Even today is what I feel, and I am very pleasantly surprised to hear these pricings. Of course, I think we will now. What is the time, by the way?
We have
what time
about
do
10
we have
minutes
the session?
more.
Okay, I think we'll just open it up and see what is the questions. Maybe Mahesh and Abhishek, if you're okay with that, let's ask the questions from our audience, and let's see what is it that they have to ask, so that we can take in their points. Now, I'm having a look at the questions in the audience, and I think both of you can also probably look at the discussion, or is in the Q&A, or is in the discussion that we have the questions. Okay, one is, I'll ask straight away what in the Q&A by Dr. Firdaus is, how do we get CAD education, she's asked. I guess that's something that probably, Firdaus, you can probably just go to the, Google it and ask her. There are a lot of these like AppTech and whatever is equivalent of AppTech and NIITs who give these CAD courses, and they do it. But Abhishek, if you want to answer that better than me, please go ahead.
Okay, so how do we get CAD education? I think CAD education is so common in there are like everybody is doing it. So there are institutes like CAD centers that you can go and get CAD education. But if you're talking about CAD education around medical industry, there is not so much specific courses. We as an Altem and Stratasys are gonna launch one shortly, where in cooperation with some medical entities, which I cannot name right away, where we will be teaching medical device development and medical model development. So you can get in touch with us, and we can support you with respect to that. Yeah, and you can get my number from the slide.
Okay, then can we move on? Next, I think the next question is, if you're involved in metal printing, what certifications pertaining to when it comes to strength and biocompatibility standards is the question.
Yeah, so I cannot recall it, which just I'll tell you in a minute. There is a particular type of certification which is a ISO certification that you need to get. There is a couple of companies in India who have that certification. I am Dr. Mahesh. If you recall that, could you please maybe answer that? I am trying to search it parallelly. I don't remember.
No, this won't be something that I would be able to comment upon.
So, but yeah, there is definitely a type of ISO certification that is available for.
I think it's ISO 13485 is what Ruchi Patak.
Yeah, 13485. That's correct. So.
Okay, thank you for that, Ruchi. Thank you for answering that. Another question is there a recruitment opportunity for a maxillofacial radiologist to enter such companies providing 3D printing services?
Not formally yet. Not formally. So unfortunately, the hiring or the recruitment in the 3D printing space is a very closely knit network. Even despite that, the technology has been in India for about 20 years now. Even if today I am hiring for somebody for my mechanical engineering team within 3D printing, I look through references, but there are once again companies that are specifically focused on medical. There's one company called 3D Incredible in Pune. There is one company called Anatomize in Mumbai. There is one company called Think 3D in Hyderabad, which have hired radiologists and even surgeons or doctors of specialized like cardiologists or neurologists in their 3D printing network. Yes. So it's not a
And then,
formal recruitment, but yeah, opportunities do pop up, but they're very less as of now.
so they go on to ask, do they provide a setup or training courses for dentistry? What would be the minimum cost for such a manufacturing unit for dentistry?
Okay, so dentistry is a different animal. Dentistry is more of a production technology. Typically, there is orthodontics applications and prosthodontic applications. So people either manufacture crowns and bridges, or they do dental implants, or they do dental aligners, which is a traditional replacement to braces. If you need to set up an aligner business, which is one of the most popular businesses in India, you need a 3D printer. Now you could have a 5 lakh rupee 3D printer also, but for a very small volume. So you could do probably one or two patient work per day. So that is 30 to 40 models per day. Or you could have some industrial machines which would at least cost you 35 to 40 lakh rupees, where you could do at least 7 to 8 patients work per day. So that's about 150 to 160 models per day. Or you could go production where you could do up to thousands of models per day, but you would end up spending more than a crore. So that's from the 3D printing point of view. Apart from that, you need intraoral scanners, which I'm not wrong, which would also cost between 20 to 40 lakh rupees with respect to a good intraoral scanner plus software. And then you'll need some technicians and that kind of cost. So if you're looking at setting up a dental business, you're looking at an investment of about a crore to crore and a half. Correct me if I'm wrong. But that's a very popular business today. It's a production business in India, and I'm very proud to say that some of my customers are actually exporting to North American countries, and they have managed to set up this business in India at a much better cost than what they would have done in China. So we have a customer in North India which does dental crowns, and they do about 300 to 400 patients per day. So they have multiple machines and they have multiple traditional milling setups also. And their time from the time that a patient goes to a dentist in US or Canada to the time he can go back to the dentist in US or Canada and get the cap installed is less than 72 hours. So in 72 hours, they're able to get the design from US, make the implant and the cap over here. 3D printing aids in that. Test it, make sure that all the fitments are right, ship it back to USA in all less than 72 hours. So
That's pretty impressive.
And here is another point that I'd like to make, which responds to a point from Dr. Mahesh earlier. Stratasys, as a policy, cut down the price for both equipment and material for dental customers for by about 50%, which is now cheaper than anywhere else in the world, including Israel and Minneapolis. Machines that would cost about 1 crore are now about 50 lakh. Materials that were about $600, $700 for 4 kilograms are now about $300, $400 per 4 kilogram. And we are planning to take a similar very drastic step for healthcare in general.
Fantastic.
So the moment that happens, I'm going to give you a call and then
yes, I'm looking forward to getting in a Stratasys printer in.
Yeah. So that's already done.
So this is all very exciting news, and it looks like very soon we might actually be able to get 3D printing to be mainstream even for healthcare in India.
Yes.
Right? It sounds like the costs are quickly coming down. It is becoming affordable. It's becoming available. It is becoming accessible, and it's a very good news. I mean, that I'm really, really happy about that discussion. And I would like to just ask one more question that the audience asked is, what is the medical? Let me see. It was somewhere here. It was asked that what is the medical software I think you're using? That's if I'm 1 second. Let me just pull it out. Yeah, what is the software you're using? Medical modeling, Abhishek, is what being asked by Dr. Tirudi.
Yeah, so we and so does Dr. Mahesh, as per I know, use a software called Materialize Mimics. It's the gold standard of the world for taking MRI data or CT data and converting into medical models. Also, it can be used for device design, so implant design, fibula guide design. And now Mimics is expensive. Especially for commercial use case, which covers hospitals and service bureaus. For academics, it's pretty cheap. Not pretty cheap, but it's a one-time cost. There are some free softwares which can also be used, like 3D Slicer or Simpleware, but there is a big question mark on their accuracy. So it does work for some crude applications, but it doesn't at all work for some very, very complex applications. But the gold standard that I would recommend to anybody is Mimics. Yeah.
Mimics. Okay. I think with that, we probably have come to the end of any questions by the audience, unless I'm missing something. And I think we have just 2 more or 3 more minutes. So let me just close up, and in case you guys are okay with that, and so
Just one question.
for me, I was
just one brief interruption.
please go ahead.
Abhishek, what do you think? Which way is the regulatory is going to lead with regard to medical devices? Because the regulatory systems are going to become more robust, and so where do you think that's leading?
Yes. So, for example, we were just discussing with our counterparts in the US. So, some of our technologies, including the DAP, have been certified by FDA now. So, and it is coming into the policy that if you are using 3D printing for invasive devices, FDA standards have to be mandatory. I think bringing that to India is also important, but I also feel that that might actually put a lot of cost pressure to the smaller companies. So the Indian government needs to think of something where they can both democratize the technology yet make it regulated. By not bringing a too much cost pressure of getting the certifications done, yet not leaving it so open-ended that people can do whatever they feel like.
Great.
Somebody posted a question that everybody was trying to build ventilators, and which is a very valid point, that everybody was building ventilators, and nobody actually spoke about what if the pressure is too high, what if it leads to an explosion, for the lack of a better word. So I was really worried. Fortunately, the projects that we did, we had a lot of expertise on board, and we had people from the certification agencies also on board who helped us. But car companies were making ventilators, and so it raises some question marks. So
You mean quality-wise? There's an issue of the quality and reliability.
In terms of efficacy and safety-wise.
No, I understand that. So I think all that is now, unfortunately, I don't have the time to sort of talk about it because we're coming to the end of the session. But because otherwise, I just want to mention this. There's a lot of move happening at the Ministry of Health and from the center. There's something known as the National Digital Health Mission, and there's a whole program that is coming up, including devices certification. Going to be one of the major things that they've worked on. It is very clearly mentioned in the blueprint, and it is a process. There is an organization called IST. I wonder if you've heard of it, but that will be one of the organizations that does this certification, and they're getting their act together, and what are the sort of devices they will like certified, and what are the sort of processes involved in that. That is just a quick information for you all. So I think I will just sum it up now. What we've had about a discussion, and coming as a sort of end user, it has been a really good discussion, and it's opened my eyes to so many things. One is the fact that this sort of technology is available fairly easily. I agree it is metros, but metros is not something in India. It is not like our metros are so far off from any point of place that you cannot access it. Or secondly, you necessarily don't have to be there going in person, because you can do a lot of it over a sort of probably a conference call or a tele, Zoom call or whatever it is. And if you have your 3D design in place, you can really get going, without having to be there in person. Okay, that's very good news. Second, very, very, very eye-opener factor was the fact that the costing is such more reasonable now, so much more reasonable. These are costs which I think are definitely not going to make me blink or blink so much as what I thought initially before I came in for these discussions with you all. And I think the third thing is the volume. The volume is very interesting, that you could actually produce such volumes before, because the thing is, there's a time gap between, you can, like you said, get the tool dies and all that ready and get something going, while in the meantime you need to have a life-saving device in place. Then there is a way that we can probably look at it. Now, I think it's an issue of getting the word out, getting this sort of information to the medical sort of ecosystem or medical fraternity, and making them aware that, listen, this is no more rocket science. This is no more Western thing. It is very much there in a country. And just like mobile phones and, your cost of mobile services has come down, this will also come down, and it will only become cheaper, and it will become more sort of prevalent. And quality is something that you go to a good service provider. Right? These are probably the main points that we have to get across. Anything else you all want to add on? Please do. Like I said, it was a real
From my
eye-opener.
side, thank you so much to both of you, and of course to Dr. Shibu for inviting me today to this session. It was a pleasure and an honor talking to the both of you, and good to see that the some good questions, some challenging questions pop up from the audience as well. I think somehow we are lacking to bring the explosion of the awareness, especially to the deep end users, especially
Yes.
in the healthcare. Of course, mechanical engineering and automotive and aerospace, I think, will not have these kind of doubts predominantly. But I think we can do a lot of more market outreach with respect to both people like Dr. Pramod and much more hospitals like the one that on the work that Dr. Mahesh is doing. And yeah,
Yeah, we need to.
we can.
Yeah, we need to keep the conversation going and engage more and more people. And medicos per se are very reluctant to adopt newer technologies. We need to get this across to him. Just like Dr. Pramod himself now only discovered that it's not that expensive as he thought it was. And that's the larger feeling that most people have. It's technologically very challenging, very expensive, very inaccessible. We need to take it right to them, and we need to constantly talk about examples where it really makes a difference and how it's cost effective, accessible. We need to keep the conversation.
Sorry, one question was not answered. Do you all have an association? Shibu, do you have an association, a 3D, and the association is called what?
Yeah, it's called 3D Printing Education and Research Association, Doctor. And the conscious effort here is actually to engage with all the industry bodies and associations across spectrum, from name it from aerospace to even yours, Doctor, in terms of, because actively we also need to see that, how we can actively work together with various associations, even TAGMA. So we're actually signing up with all of these associations, because see, the end users who come from these associations are the ones who should be,
yeah. So right. About that, let's have a conversation once you have finished with your conference and all, because I think with what I've heard with my discussions with Dr. Mahesh and Abhishek, is it's not something that is really not it is affordable even as of today, and secondly it is accessible, and the production numbers are something that can be something that will be of use to us. Okay, so I think let's move forward with getting the word out and getting things done. So with that, I will, from my side, say thank you. Firstly, Shibu, for having invited me. Thank you a lot to Abhishek and Mahesh for having, Dr. Mahesh for having taken up the questions and answered them so well, and also for expanding on what is the possibilities that we can have here. And thank you to the audience for having asked those good questions and taking part in this whole session. So with that, I will sign out. Anything else you all would like to say, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I think it was a very insightful session, and we've actually covered a lot of aspects which probably would not be covered in general conferences. And see, 3D printing, there wasn't any conference per se focusing on the end user. It's more to do with technology at times that we are. And correct me if I'm wrong, Abhishek.
Yes.
This is an experience for you, I'm sure,
Yeah.
right? So that's coming from, we want end users to be updated. So Dr. Pramod, as he comes with the expertise, he was actually unaware of a lot of things. There could be a lot of inhibitions in terms of, in his mind, maybe this is very costly. He's been talking to me very extensively for the last 2-3 months. We've been actually in touch in terms of sharing all those ideas and thoughts. But I think that's exactly what we need to do. It needs to be the end user who needs to be responsive, and we need to ensure that they need to be responsive so that everybody benefits. So our tilt is towards the end user always, ensuring that how this technology can be proliferated rightly and get into deeper. Yeah, also getting the government, now that 3D Para, it's a non-profit organization. So we would also want to work in confluence with experts like you who can also come on board, and maybe we can take the course forward. In fact, we are already working with the Aerospace Defense Consultant Association of India, and we've already signed an NDA with them. Likewise, we will also be signing up NDAs with various associations in dental, research, medical, and Indian Medical Association. Also, we hope to see that. In fact, this event we were also looking at, having it CME as in CD. What is that called? CME. Yeah. If I'm wrong, for doctors to attend and then get that acknowledgement from these associations that it is a good learning experience. So I think it all starts with training, education, research, skill development is the key. That's what 3D Graphy will take the responsibility in terms of holding these conferences. In fact, yesterday we had a session on orthopedic application. I'm sure Dr. Lalit sir will also be there in the session, I'm sure, because the parallel session has got postponed. But he did express his intent to look at an HA coating company in India. Now, there are many of them and researchers who are doing some great work already, like Dr. Jayesh Ballare, sir. He's working some fantastic. He's working on this research on coatings as well. So nobody is aware. So that's exactly what we do as a conference like this, for them to know and be updated that this is the course and this is how you can get in touch with the right people. So I think our intent is very clear. Conferences like these should actually pave the way to take things forward and see that how it can benefit everybody going forward. Economies of scale, very, very important. Cost of machines coming down. Yes, I remember the fact that when there was, an FDM machine would cost you what 22 lakhs when it started. Now it's very challenging. We have no competition in those machines, but those are free. Those can only probably provide certain application, but there are a number of other products and other machines which actually get into the intricacies in terms of implant, metal implant, a lot of things. So I think we are heading the right way with a technology which has a great future. And thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time. And do participate in subsequent sessions. The other session now we will follow is on bioprinting. Two of these sessions are also got extended with more time. That's going to be in the evening. Great learning. So thank you so much, and be a part of this day program. We're also going to talk about AR, augmented reality. So 3D Graphy is also consciously looking at 3D printing and AR and AI, because these are all going to complement each other going forward. And Dr. Pramod Jacob also is a key respondent in terms of promoting AI, because he does some great work in his solutions to be offering to hospitals. But Doctor, I would also want to see that, how we can set up these kind of conferences very specific to only hospitals, if the need be.
So that's what. Now let's have conversations. I will tell you. I will give you pointers, and I'll introduce you. Okay, but make sure that we have a discussion. You have to make a little marketing package. And these are the points you have to bring up, that the cost is not so much, that the production numbers can be so much, that it is now available and accessible. These are the points you have to make sure is there in that package, so that when in a one pager, when they see it, then we can take on the contacts. That I will discuss more. Okay.
Thank you so much for your time, gentlemen, and get on, and you can connect in the meeting rooms or wherever as per convenience. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.